Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
On March 25 in ancient Rome, priests of Cybele announced that their god had risen from death. The celebration was called the Hilaria, the Day of Joy. For 3 days before it, the city had mourned. On the 22nd, a pine tree representing the body of Attis was carried to the temple, wrapped in wool bandages like a corpse and decorated with violets said to have sprung from his blood. On the 24th, the Day of Blood, devotees slashed their arms. Some castrated themselves. The grief was real and theatrical. Then came the 25th, and with it joy, feasting, processions through the streets. The god who died on the tree was alive again. 2 centuries later, Christians in the same city would announce in the same month that a different god had risen from a different death. The resemblance was close enough that Firmicus Maternus, writing around 347 CE, called the Attis cult a demonic parody of Easter. But the cult of Attis had been celebrating in Rome since at least the reign of Claudius, decades before the Gospels were written, and the pattern they were both enacting was already ancient when Rome was a village on a swamp. In 1929, archaeologists at Ras Shamra on the Syrian coast unearthed clay tablets inscribed in a language nobody had seen before. The script turned out to be Ugaritic, a Northwest Semitic language closely related to Hebrew, and the tablets contained the mythology of a Bronze Age civilization destroyed around 1185 BCE. Among them was the Baal cycle. The story is blunt. Mot, whose name means death, challenges Baal, the storm god who controls the rain. Baal descends to the underworld and dies. The text states it plainly, mighty Baal is dead, the prince, lord of earth, has perished. The god El mourns, the warrior goddess Anat mourns. Then Anat finds Mot and destroys him with a violence that reads like harvest instructions. She cleaves him with a sword, winnows him with a sieve, burns him with fire, grinds him with millstones, sows him in a field. After this, Baal returns to life. El dreams that the heavens rain oil and the riverbeds run with honey. These tablets date to the 14th or 13th century BCE. The god dies, is mourned, and returns. The language of his enemy's destruction is agricultural, winnowing, grinding, sowing. Over 1,000 years before a Roman centurion watched a man die on a cross outside Jerusalem, the pattern was already carved in clay. Baal is not alone. In Sumer, the poem of Inanna's descent to the netherworld tells of the goddess passing through 7 gates, being stripped at each one, and hanging dead on a hook for 3 days and 3 nights before being revived by intervention from the god Enki. Her husband, Dumuzi, is then sent to the underworld as her substitute, condemned to spend half the year below and half above. It is a bargain with death, a seasonal rotation that maps onto the cycle of agriculture in the Mesopotamian plains. The texts date to the early 2nd millennium BCE. At Byblos in Phoenicia, the cult of Adonis enacted a similar drama. Lucian of Samosata, writing in the 2nd century CE, described the festival. Days of mourning for the dead god, women wailing and beating their breasts, then the proclamation that he lives and is sent into the air. The river Adonis, now the Nar Ibrahim in Lebanon, runs red with iron oxide sediment each spring. The ancients saw blood. In Egypt, Isis searched for the dismembered body of Osiris, reassembled him, and reanimated him long enough to conceive Horus. Osiris did not return to the world of the living. He became ruler of the dead. The Koyak festival, held annually at Abydos, involved creating grain and mud effigies of Osiris, watering them, and watching them sprout. The dead god's body produced new grain. Life came from death, visibly in a pot on a temple floor. The scholar who tried to tie all of this together was James Frazer. His 1890 work, The Golden Bough, proposed a universal pattern, the dying and rising vegetation god, a figure who personified the agricultural cycle and whose ritual death and return ensured the crops. The category included Osiris, Tammuz, Adonis, Attis, and others. Fraser saw Christianity as the latest iteration. A century later, Jonathan Z. Smith dismantled the category. In his 1990 book, Drudgery Divine, Smith argued that no single deity fits the full pattern when examined on its own textual evidence. Osiris rules the dead, not the living. Persephone is abducted, not killed. The clearest resurrection accounts of pagan gods come from sources written after Christianity was already dominant, raising the possibility that late pagans borrowed from Christians rather than the reverse. Then, Trygve Mettinger published The Riddle of Resurrection in 2001 and argued that Smith overcorrected. Mettinger examined each case strictly on its primary texts. His conclusion? Baal's death and return in the Ugaritic texts is genuine, explicit, and predates Christianity by over a millennium. The Phoenician god Melkart had a documented annual festival of awakening. Smith was right that Fraser was too sweeping. He was wrong that the pattern does not exist at all. The honest position, the category is real, but smaller than Fraser claimed, and each case is doing something different. Baal conquers death, Dumuzi is trapped by it, and Osiris is transformed by it. The question underneath them all is the same. Now consider the number 3. Inanna hangs dead on a hook in the Sumerian underworld for 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus lies in a tomb and rises on the 3rd day. Jonah sits in the belly of a great fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus himself makes the connection explicit in Matthew 12:40. The 3rd day motif appears in Hosea 6:2, written in the 8th century BCE. After 2 days he will revive us. On the 3rd day he will raise us up, that we may live before him. This is the oldest Hebrew text that connects the 3rd day with divine restoration, and many scholars see it as the direct background for the formula Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 15:4. But the pattern reaches beyond any single textual tradition. The new moon disappears from the sky for roughly 3 days between its last visible crescent and its first. For cultures that tracked lunar phases, this 3-day absence was the most obvious natural cycle of death and return. The moon dies, 3 days pass, and the moon returns, every month, visible to everyone since the first human looked up. Nobody has proven the connection between the dark moon and the 3 days motif. The ancient texts do not say, like the moon, but nobody has explained the coincidence either. The Sumerians, who gave us the 3-day death of Inanna, were among the most meticulous astronomical observers in history. They tracked the moon obsessively. That their primary underworld myth uses the exact duration of lunar invisibility may mean something, or it may not. The coincidence remains unexplained. The early church fathers did not hide from the parallels. They confronted them head-on. Justin Martyr, writing around 155 CE, in his first apology addressed to Emperor Antoninus Pius, catalogued the similarities himself. He listed Dionysus, torn apart and risen; Heracles, ascended to heaven through fire; Asclepius, who healed the sick and raised the dead; Perseus, born of a virgin. He then offered an explanation. Demons, knowing the Old Testament prophecies in advance, planted imitation stories in pagan mythology to cause confusion when the real fulfillment arrived. This is the diabolical mimicry argument. Satan copied Christ before Christ arrived, using the prophecies as a cheat sheet. It is a bizarre argument by modern standards, but it reveals something important. The parallels were obvious enough that a second-century Christian, writing to a Roman emperor, felt compelled to account for them. Justin was not responding to modern comparative religion. He was responding to what everyone in the Mediterranean could see. Tertullian extended the argument around 200 CE, noting that the cult of Mithras practiced baptism, offered bread and wine at communal meals, and included a resurrection element. He attributed all of it to demonic counterfeiting. The Dionysian mysteries faced the same charge. So did the Orphic mysteries, with their gold tablets guiding the dead through the underworld. Beneath all the apologetics, a fact persists. In Rome, where the Vatican Hill housed a Cybele temple with active bull sacrifices until 390 CE, Christianity was not arriving in a vacuum. It was arriving in a city where the Hilaria already celebrated a dying god's return every March, where Mithraists broke bread in underground temples, where Dionysian funerary art on sarcophagi depicted triumph over death as the most popular burial motif of the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The Christians did not import the resurrection concept into Rome. They brought a new version of a story Rome had been telling itself for generations. The first major crisis in Christian history was about a calendar. In the 2nd century, Christians in Asia Minor celebrated the Passion on Nisan 14, the Jewish Passover date, regardless of what day of the week it fell on. They called themselves Quartodecimans, from the Latin for 14th. They traced their practice to the Apostle John himself. For them, Christ's death as the Paschal Lamb was the center, and the date of the sacrifice mattered more than the day of the week. Rome insisted on Sunday. The resurrection was the anchor event. When Polycarp, bishop of Smyrna, visited Pope Anicetus in Rome around 155 CE, they disagreed politely and parted friends. A generation later, the temperature rose. Polycrates, bishop of Ephesus, wrote a defiant letter listing the great authorities behind his practice: Philip the Apostle, John, who reclined on the Lord's breast, Polycarp of Smyrna. Pope Victor I responded by attempting to excommunicate the entire Asian church. Irenaeus of Lyon, though himself a Sunday observer, rebuked Victor for the overreach. The crisis passed, unresolved. It took Constantine to force a decision. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE mandated Sunday observance and decoupled the calculation from the Jewish calendar entirely. Constantine's letter to the churches afterward was blunt. "Let us then have nothing in common with the detestable Jewish crowd," he wrote. The stated rationale was separation from Judaism. The mathematics that followed were staggeringly complex. Computing Easter, known as the computus, required the 19-year Metonic cycle discovered by the Athenian astronomer Medon in 432 BCE, epact tables tracking lunar drift, and a fixed equinox date of March 21. Bede, writing in 725 CE, considered the computus the central intellectual challenge of Christian scholarship. When the Julian calendar drifted 10 days from the actual equinox by the 16th century, Pope Gregory XIII's 1982 reform deleted 10 days from October and corrected the tables. The Eastern Orthodox churches never adopted the reform. They still calculate Easter on the Julian calendar, which is why Western and Orthodox Easter diverge in most years, sometimes as much as 5 weeks. The irony is quiet, but total. The feast that Constantine stripped from the Jewish calendar now requires the most Jewish element in Christianity's intellectual toolkit, a lunisolar computation rooted in the same Mesopotamian astronomical tradition that produced the calendar Nicaea rejected. In almost every language on earth, the name for this feast comes from Hebrew, Pesach, meaning Passover, French, Pâques, Spanish, Pascua, Italian, Pasqua, Russian, Pascha. Even Welsh pasg and Irish caisc trace back to the Latin pasca. Two languages break the pattern, English and German. The sole ancient source for the name is a single sentence. The Venerable Bede, writing in De Temporum Ratione in 725 CE, noted that the Anglo-Saxons called the month corresponding to April Easter Monath after a goddess named Istra, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. That is all he said. No description of her attributes, no myths, no cult practices, no images. One sentence, one goddess, and then silence for 11 centuries. Jacob Grimm picked up the thread in 1835. In Deutsche Mythologie, he argued that if the Anglo-Saxons had Istra, the continental Germans must have had a cognate goddess he reconstructed as Astara. He was honest about the fact that he had no independent German source. He was extrapolating from a linguistic cognate of Bede's single reference. For a long time, scholars dismissed the whole thing. One mention by one monk in 725 CE is thin evidence for a goddess. Then archaeologists found the inscriptions. Near Morkenharf in Germany, votive stones from the 2nd and 3rd century CE were found dedicated to deities called the Matrone Austrianae, part of a broader cult that left hundreds of inscriptions across the Lower Rhine. The name contains the same root as Istra and Ostern. The name of Easter may carry within it a trace of the oldest goddess in the Indo-European world, a personification of the dawn so embedded in language that it survived the replacement of every religion that ever worshipped her. Or the word may simply mean east, the direction of sunrise, the month when the sun returns. The symbols are older than any of the stories told to explain them. Engraved ostrich egg fragments from Deep Kloof rock shelter in South Africa date to approximately 60,000 BCE. They are among the oldest decorated objects ever found. In the Royal Cemetery at Ur, from around 2600 BCE, decorated ostrich eggs accompanied the dead. The egg as a cosmic symbol of creation is global. The Orphic egg from which Phanes hatched in 6th century BCE Greek tradition, the Hindu golden womb in the Rig Veda, the Chinese Pangu growing inside a cosmic egg for 18,000 years, the Finnish Kalevala where the world forms from a broken egg on the knee of the Water Mother. These myths arose independently. The practical layer matters too. During the 40 days of Lent, medieval Christians could not eat eggs. Hens kept laying. By Easter Sunday, households sat on a mountain of eggs that needed to be eaten, given away, or preserved. The sacred and the practical are not in competition. They coexist. The Easter hare. The first written mention comes from George Frank von Frankenau in 1682, describing a folk belief in Alsace that a hare lays the Easter eggs. But the hare carries its own older symbolism. European hares go spectacularly mad in March, boxing and leaping in open fields. The hare on the moon motif appears in Chinese tradition as the jade rabbit, first recorded in the 3rd century BCE, in Aztec creation myth as a rabbit thrown at the moon to dim its brightness, and in Buddhist Jataka tales. These traditions had no contact with each other. The moon's dark patches look like a rabbit from every continent. The most mysterious hare image is the 3 hares motif. 3 hares chasing each other in a circle, sharing 3 ears between them. Each hare appears to have 2 ears, but each ear belongs to the adjacent hare as well. The oldest examples are in the Dunhuang cave temples in China from the 6th or 7th century CE. It appears on 13th century Islamic metalwork from Mosul. At least 17 medieval churches in Devon, England, have it carved on roof bosses. It traveled the entire Silk Road, from Buddhist caves through Islamic workshops to English parish churches, and nobody knows what it means. Fire. The Paschal fire in Germanic tradition predates its Christianization. An 8th century Frankish document listing forbidden pagan customs mentions sacrilegious fires at spring. The Paschal candle ceremony, with its striking of new fire from flint and steel, its procession of a single flame into a dark church, and the singing of the Exultet, dates to at least the late 4th century. The symbolism is Christ as light entering darkness. The practice of kindling new fire at the turning of the year is older than Christ by millennia. Water. In parts of northern Germany, the custom of Osterwasser persisted into the modern era. A young woman goes out before dawn on Easter Sunday to collect water from a flowing stream in complete silence. If she speaks or looks back, the water loses its power. The silence requirement, the prohibition on looking back, the dawn timing. Orpheus could not look back. Lot's wife could not look back. The motif crosses cultures and millennia. On March 20th or 21st, the sun crosses the celestial equator. Day and night are equal. What happens next is the same everywhere, independently. In Iran, roughly 300 million people celebrate Nowruz. The Haft Sin table holds 7 items beginning with the letter Sin: sprouted wheat for rebirth, sumac for the color of sunrise, garlic for protection. Painted eggs sit on the table. On the last Tuesday night before Nowruz, people jump over bonfires, chanting, "Your redness to me, my yellowness to you." Nowruz is attested from the Achaemenid period, around 500 BCE. The bas-reliefs at Persepolis showed delegations bringing New Year gifts to the king. The festival survived the Arab conquest, the Mongol invasion, and 1,400 years of Islamic rule. In India, Holi arrives near the equinox. The night before, a bonfire burns the demoness Holika, who tried to kill the boy devotee Prahlada by sitting with him in fire, protected by a boon of fire immunity. The boon transferred to the boy, and the demoness burned. The next morning, color explodes. Powder and water erase caste, age, and propriety. Across Slavic lands, Maslenica burns a straw effigy of winter dressed in women's clothes. Blini, round and golden, stand in for the sun. On Forgiveness Sunday, the last day before Lent, everyone asks forgiveness from everyone. You do not carry grudges into the planting season. In Japan, Higan centers the equinox in a 7-day observance. Families visit ancestral graves. In Pure Land Buddhism, Amida Buddha's paradise lies in the west. At the equinox, the sun sets due west, pointing directly at the Pure Land. The barrier between this world and the other world is thinnest when day and night balance. People face the sunset and contemplate what lies beyond it. In the Andes, Paucar Raimi brings ritual bathing in waterfalls at dawn. In Thailand and Myanmar, Songkran drenches the world in water. The Cherokee relight a sacred fire. Fire, water, painted eggs, effigies of death burned to ash, grave visiting, and the rhythm of fasting followed by feasting, these practices appear on every inhabited continent among peoples who had no knowledge of each other. The Cherokee had no contact with the Zoroastrians. The Balinese developed separately from the Slavs. The Andean Quechua knew nothing of Japanese Buddhism, and yet they converge on the same week with the same symbols, performing the same actions. The simplest explanation is not diffusion, but convergent evolution. The same astronomical event is observable everywhere. The same agricultural reality creates the same emotional needs. The same available symbols present themselves to everyone. And the same psychological need to mark the transition, to kill what was bad, to purify, to begin, is not cultural. It is human. The spring equinox arrives today as it did when those Ugaritic scribes carved Baal's death into wet clay, and the days will grow longer now regardless of what anyone believes about why. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and check the description for the full article with images and sources. More episodes coming soon.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.